Welcome, family. Welcome to another episode of Spiritual Shift. I'm your host, B. Sean Riley, and welcome. Glad you could join us. Spiritual Shift really is about helping people to tap into their into the divine spark within themselves. It doesn't really matter whether you are a Christian, Muslim, Jewish, it doesn't really matter. Everyone has a divine spark within them. It doesn't even matter if you don't follow a religion or have a religion, subscribe to religion. It doesn't really matter. Spiritual shift really is about helping people really find that divine spark within themselves and tap into it, connect to it, and use that spark, like help grow that spark into the divine beings that we were all destined to become. So, with that said, on today's episode, this is a really special episode for me. I've been talking about this for a long time. We're going to have a real grown up conversation about the Bible and astrology. I talk about this all the time with a few people that have the have the bandwidth to really have deep conversations about the Bible and astrology, this, that, and the other. I have one of those special people with me today on this episode, Kenya McGuire Johnson. Come on down, Kenya. What's up, my lovely?
Hello, my love. How are you?
I am good. I am good. So
Good.
yeah, I'm glad you could join us for this episode. We've been talking about this for a long time, and one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about this episode, when I wanted to do this episode, was me and astrology, like you, go back a little ways. Maybe not as far as you, and in the same capacity as you, but me and astrology go back a little ways. It goes back to, for me, it goes back to like when I was in seminary. And I talk about my seminary stories in a previous episode if you want to check that out. But I went to seminary many moons ago, and maybe a year, no, maybe like 2 years into seminary. It was 2 years into seminary. I had a friend of mine, real cool sister. Um, uh, I'm not gonna mention her name. I was about to, and I was like,
I was
"Oh, should
gonna
I
say,
mention
you
her name?"
gonna say her name? No,
I
go
like to
ahead.
say her name because I've talked to you about her a lot.
Yeah.
So she would, she was we were in seminary together, and we were going through, and she was a Christian, she was saved and sanctified, all of that, came from the church. Um, the interesting thing about it is that she was an astrologer. She did astrology. So as I talk about in previous episodes, I came from a pretty conservative denomination, evangelical fundamental church, not a very well known evangelical church. Lots of churches around the world and around the United States, but it's just not very well known. Um, and so we were not, astrology was just not something that we talked about on Sunday morning, right? So when we're in seminary, and my friend, and around my second year, like I said, I talk about this in another episode. I was going through a thing. One of my other friends had already bailed out. He couldn't take it. He was just like, I can't take this. It's just too much. It's too, they're uncovering too many things. So this is around that second year, the middle of my second year, maybe. And she tells me, like, yeah, I do astrology. And I'm like, huh? So, being the daring soul that I am, she was like, well, do you want me to do a reading on you? And I was like, okay. So she did it. And I was amazed. I was amazed. and like slightly angered and annoyed. There was this little piece of me that was like, first of all, this was amazing. And second of all, why am I this, 3/4 through my graduate degree is in seminary, and I knew nothing about this. I knew nothing about this technology, this tool, this apparatus, you know, to help me, because at the time I was going through, we all always going through things in our personal lives, right? I wasn't just going through the stuff with seminary and Christianity and my faith, and I wasn't just going. I was going through personal stuff in my personal life. And what she, I keep trying not to say her name. Um, what she took me through during that process, it just completely blew my whole brain back, right? So, long story short, I did multiple sessions with her and went deeper into just this concept of astrology, and we're in seminary doing this. This is what's crazy about this, right? Um, so after I graduated, I was just like, okay, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of astrology. Like, how can I really do something with this or take something deeper with this? And on top of the fact, so I started to really dig deeper into, like, how does astrology relate to the Bible? Is it in the Bible? I mean, of course, I knew it was in the Bible because I had spent, you know, a lot of money and 3 years of my life really intensely studying the Bible. And I knew that there were lots of things in there. Now that I was introduced to astrology, there were lots of things in there. I'm like, this seems very similar to astrology, you know? So, um, so for example, right? Um, I talk about in a previous video, I talk about the resurrection of Jesus, right? I talk about how w- Christianity has this theology of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. Jesus came, to this world to die on a cross for our sins, and for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son. Right? Everybody knows this verse. But when I started really studying the astrological stuff, there is a particular astrological and astronomical, and you correct me if I'm wrong, phenomenon that happens around December, around the holidays, around Christmas. There's a phenomenon that happens, right? Now, I talk about this in a previous video if you want to go check that out. But where the sun literally stops for 3 days and then starts moving again. Now that's astronomy. Am I correct? That's because that's a physical scientific phenomenon. Like, the sun actually stops. Am I correct, Kenya? Is that?
Well, yes. I mean, well,
Yes.
it's well, I
Yes.
mean, it's in
So,
a very generic
in a generic,
way. It
yeah,
doesn't stop, but there's a significant slowdown. But go ahead.
it's a pause. It like
Yeah.
slows down and pauses for a second. So when I started studying this piece, so that's kind of like the technical scientific, what's happening with those heavenly bodies, right? So then when I started looking into, well, astrologically, what is the symbology of this? So the ancient world was very open about what this symbolically meant. That, and we call it another name for this phenomenon is, people call it the winter solstice, right? That this is what this is called. But some way, somehow, some way, when Christianity started taking off, this phenomenon got extrapolated into a physical death, burial, and resurrection of the Son of God, like the sun in the sky, which I guess if anybody owns the sun, it would be God, right? He created the sun. That got extrapolated into a physical person in the name of Jesus who died on the cross and was born again. I forgot to mention that this phenomenon, not just the sun slowing down, but the path that the sun takes almost looks like a cross in the sky, in the not the sky that we know the sky, but the stars. It almost looks like a cross. So this was like, this blew my mind back then when I started really studying this stuff. So this is why I wanted to talk about the Bible and astrology. This is why, because not only that, but another pivotal story in the Christian story is Jesus. When Jesus was born, we all know the story, the Easter story, that there were these three, like, why three wise men? Like, why three? Like, why three? These three wise men come, they travel from the east all the way to some place called Bethlehem. And I want to actually read um, the scripture in Matthew that this happens, right? That talks about this. It's Matthew 2, 1 and 2. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi, which is another curious word, Magi, from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." We saw his star and now we've come to worship him. So not only did they see a star and was like, "Oh, Jesus is coming," but they used the stars to track him down. And then when they found him, they were like, "Yeah, this is the guy right here. This is the dude." So this was all done with heavenly stars stuff. So this is why we had to. This has been coming for a long time, and this is going to be a real growing conversation about about the Bible and astrology. So I have. I'm sorry, my glasses are caught. I have with us today, ladies and gentlemen, um, a very adept astrologer. She just happens to be a very close friend of mine, very close partner of mine. And we're gonna talk about astrology and kind of like what it is and how it relates to the Bible. So Kenya, tell me kind of like how you got into astrology, why you got into astrology, and just kind of like a synopsis of why you love astrology, like
Mm,
why you do it, why you study it.
yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on. And yes, we do talk a lot about this. And um, I will preface this by, he's being very, very gracious in saying, and that I consider myself an astrology coach. I sometimes steer, and he knows I sometimes steer away from saying astrologer because I don't really use astrology. I literally use it as a tool, and I use it as a way to really help people and help people really discover themselves. So I'm not one that likes to just talk about a bunch of placements, and my expertise is in the birth chart. So that's important in the world of astrology to kind of differentiate, because astrology is a science as far as I'm concerned. You look online, it may negate that, but I am a scientist. I'm a physical therapist. I had to study science. And so the way you have to study science is very similar, if not the exact same, of how you have to study astrology to really understand it. Um, So there's a lot of aspects of astrology. So for me, people have been asking me this more and more lately because I'm becoming more and more public about talking about astrology. And they're like, when did you? And I'm like, I just don't remember how I started learning this. I feel like I was born knowing astrology because as a kid, the only thing that I can maybe attribute to my sister has always been really into astrology. And my sister is 8 years older than me. And she taught me how to read and she taught me, she taught me a lot of stuff. And so I think it must have been her who exposed me to astrology. And she probably didn't even really realize it. It was just a matter of reading the horoscope. So I remember as a child, my earliest memory is just I would always go to the end of magazines or newspapers and read the astrology and read what a Scorpio. I'm a Scorpio sun.
And
We
you were like a teenager or before?
No, 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 no. This is no. I was probably like 7,
Oh, wow.
8. Yeah, I was young. Um, I like definitely I was in elementary school. And I feel like it was probably around second, third grade.
Wow.
Um, so because I was reading liner notes for albums, like I was reading Stevie Wonder and Minnie Riperton. I remember reading their liner notes, and Minnie Riperton died when I was 5. So I started reading when I was around 4, um, and I could read then. So I would say it had to be very shortly after. And again, this is because my sister was older than me and I was her shadow. And I followed everything she did. And so I think she exposed me. But yeah, I would read the horoscopes. And I grew up, my parents were not into the church. They were definitely believers of God. We had Bibles in our house. We would go to church on occasion, but we were not, they did not, I would not say we grew up as churchgoers. And that was quite intentional on their end.
Mhm.
um, my grandfather, so my paternal grandfather, my father's father, was a very known big minister in their community in North Carolina when he was growing up, and made my father go to church. My dad used to say he had to go to church every single day, like all day, every day, the way he made it. And he said he just vowed he was not going to do that to his kids, that, he just wasn't going to do that. And so we went to church when we were invited to church, or my mother wanted to go to church a bit more. I think for her own kind of navigation of her own life, I think she was attempting to find a church home, but I just remember us never consistently going. So I say that to say that astrology, me talking about being a Scorpio, or my dad was a Leo, my mom is a Gemini, sister's Gemini, just talking about that was basically like talking about anything else that you talk about in the house. Nobody flinched. Nobody was like, oh, what's that? It was like, oh, that's interesting. And tell me more. And so I just thought it was really, I really normalized it and really thought that everybody, like how you learn how old you are, how you learn your colors, how you learn your name. I just thought if you know your birthday, you know your sign. And so that was normalized for me. And that's all I really knew. And it helped me navigate when I would meet people when I was young. If I knew your sign, then I knew I could tell a lot about you. I knew that, oh, you're a Gemini. Okay, well, that's going to mean this. Oh, you're a Pisces. Oh, that's going to mean a lot. And it was very normalized. And so it really wasn't, honestly, I didn't even talk about it a lot, honestly, because it was like if I would go around talking about, did you know the color pink is this, like that? Because I didn't think it was special. I didn't think it was anything that anybody didn't know. So it really wasn't until I honestly got to college and I was in a gospel choir. And it was in the gospel choir that I think I must have slipped and said something about a sign. And it was like, wow, and I was like, oh my God, like what? And I was this weird bird in gospel choir because everybody else in gospel choir had grown up in a church or was a part of a church choir. And that's why they were now at Howard. We went to Howard HU. That's why now they're in Howard's gospel choir and their parents were ministers or they're all the thing. And I was none of those things. I just love to sing. And I had a dorm mate, one of my friends. I had just come to Howard, and she she heard me singing one day and she's like, I'm trying out for a choir. You want to try out with me? Okay. And so that's how it was a very Forrest Gump thing. But that was the first time that I really started realizing, oh, there's an issue with this,
There's an
huh?
issue with this. So
And just a real quick, why I love, because you asked me why do I love it? It's because of what you said about the person when you were in seminary school, that reaction you had of like, oh my gosh. I love it because of the oh my gosh and how much it unlocks and how much it makes sense and how much it connects you to a higher source to connect you to God, but also the God in you. And that's the piece for me that makes astrology so significant and why I love it so much, because it constantly reminds you of how divine you are and how intentional your presence on this earth is and how much you matter. And that's why I love it, because I think that's missing so badly in mankind, particularly right now, is you mattering just because you're here, not because you did anything, not because you accomplished anything, but because you have breath. And I think that that is why I love it so much, because when I'm able to coach people using it, they can immediately sense their worth and be seen. So,
yeah, thank you for that. So why do you think, and then after you respond, I'll give you my take on it. Why do you think astrology gets such a bad rap with, say, Christians per se?
yeah, I just think anything that we're completely, and I mean this word in the truest of its meaning, when we're ignorant or we do not know, we do not understand, or we've been conditioned to understand wrong, then now you believe whatever it was you were told. And so I think that because astrology, and you and I talk about this a lot, because astrology is so incredibly powerful when you really begin to study it and understand it, I think um if you, and I'm not the, you are the seminary graduate of religion and so forth, but when you begin to see how many systems have been made to take away people's power and people's dominion and people's understanding, I think that astrology is an incredibly powerful tool to understanding self. And so I do think that historically, um, you know, the way we've used the Bible and so forth has been used to control, and we know this. We know this very well. We know it's not a hard fact to find, especially Black people in terms of slavery. The Bible was not used to help us get closer to God. Okay.
Right.
It was used in a very, very abusive, manipulative way. And unfortunately, I think in order to further strip indigenous cultures and people who have had rituals in tandem with their religion, that part of that ritual piece, that part of those tools, those modalities got stripped from our understanding. And the true sense of colonialism, where we were made to believe one particular thought pattern, and anything outside of that was not only said no, but paganized, but demonized, like to really put the fear in us to further separate us from the very tools that really allowed us to thrive so strong. So I think that's where it, historically has come from, and it just keeps getting passed on generation by generation. But it's shifting now
Hmm.
because astrologically we're shifting. So
Things are
and
shifting.
things are shifting.
Things are shifting.
Things
Right.
are shifting. Yeah.
Um, I agree with all of that. Yeah, I definitely think it gets a bad rap because of a lot of stuff you said. The Bible has definitely been used to manipulate and control. Um, the thing is, astrology, and I'm not an expert in astrology, but I do know a few things about astrology. And like I said, I haven't even started my class with you yet.
I know he starts by the time the video's out,
So,
you will have been a pro. You might have
right,
already been completed.
right. By the time this video comes out, I will have completed my intro
His
class,
intro
previous
class, his
class,
foundations
my
class,
my
yes.
foundations in astrology. But the thing is that astrology, because it is an occult science, has also been used to control and manipulate people. Um, historically, it has in the ancient world. Astrology, the astrologers were the advisors to the kings and the rulers and the people that ran things. All
Right,
right.
right,
um and it was a science that was very, in one sense, it was very guarded, it was very um hidden from the masses because of its power. So if you listen to or watch some of my videos, you know that I talk about the geopolitical nature of religion. Period. It's political. you know the control of masses, large numbers of people, is paramount in any religion, any formal organized religion. you know
right,
you have masses of people that are organized around a particular thought, okay,
right.
a particular concept, particular consciousness. So astrology, you can't really because see astrology, from my perspective, from my understanding, it gives you two, and this is from someone who grew up Jesus, 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 Jesus. Okay. When I first understood what this science was, I said it in when when I introduced the show, that it was like a light bulb went off in my head. I was like, this is an amazing tool to understand. I'm trying to figure out my life at this point. When my friend
Well,
was doing a reading, I was just like, oh my God, I understand so much now. Like, this is why this happened, and this is why this is going on. This is why I feel like I'm crazy. This is why I feel like this. And it was right there. And I was like, ooh, I keep not almost saying her name. So
you're
I
doing
was
good.
I was like, show me where you're getting this from. And she would just pull up the chart like you do, be like, it's right here. You see this right here? This is what this is right here. And I was just like, get the out
It's
of here.
I mean, I think we have to take a moment and a pause and just step outside of the terminology of astrology or religion or whatever, and just think common sense for a minute. When we think about beings and we think about how we live and move in our life, there is nothing, there's nothing really that exists that doesn't have some type of instructions or manual, or like to make things be or go, like we have these guides. So why why is it so absurd if we think that the Bible is a tool to give us a certain level of a guide into understanding? Why would we think that's singular? And the thing is the Bible is a more, it's kind of like the dictionary, right? Meaning, and when I say dictionary, meaning it's giving kind of a broad understanding. You have to kind of pick and kind of go in and, but to think that we don't individually, that God and source is not big enough to give us even more direction. I mean, we just it's just you just have to almost step back for a minute to kind of say, huh, could it be? Could it be that I came here with something, with a resource to help me, specifically me, not just beings, not just women, not just males, not just children, not just, but me specifically? Could it be that there are ways that I can actually better understand, not predict my future, which I think a lot of people misunderstand also, not worship a star, not, but just to better understand, I have these tendencies, I have these propensities, and I need to accept that about myself so that I can use it and do something. So yes, I just think sometimes we have to not get so whatever and just put a little bit of common sense in, as to why this could potentially be. And what you said about historically and about, astrology being hidden because of its power, but yet rulers using it. Absolutely. That's exactly. And astrologers were killed if they were wrong. Like if they, because it was a very serious job to
Right.
be,
Yeah.
to be in that position. And so, just like the cycles of anything in time, there was a cycle, astrology goes, because it's such an ancient tool, it goes through these cycles where it's more seen and where it's more underground, and where it's more seen and where it's more underground. And right now it's beveling back up again into a more seen space. And I do think it's important that, yes, anything can be used to manipulate you. Anything can be
Yeah.
used to abuse you. There is nothing that can't. You can use a shoe and hit
Mhm.
somebody over the head with a shoe, but the shoe was not really made for that. The shoe was so you could walk and protect your foot. So anything can be used as that. So we can't just relegate astrology or the Bible or anything to one level of abuse. I would never say that about the Bible. I would never just say, oh, the Bible is, they use that against us in slavery, so the Bible is bad. It's like, no, 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 no. Who held the Bible and
Mhm.
what they did with it. That's where we have to be careful. And I think with astrology, the same thing. And we have to be careful because we are in a more, advanced state of humanity. So the way people can manipulate and use astrology is much more finessed than just saying, I'm going to come control your life. I mean, the TikToks, I tell people you have to really make sure if you decide you want to understand astrology, you need to go learn astrology. Like, you don't want to just go on YouTube and just hear a bunch of videos. I think it's an introduction. I think it's a perspective. But I think if in fact it becomes a tool that it resonates for you, then you want to work with people who've actually studied it
Mhm.
so that you aren't manipulated and so
Mhm.
that you are given, because astrology does not tell anybody what to do and what not to do. That's not astrology. So,
Yeah. So, I mean, absolutely. And I think because astrology is so powerful, you can't you can't have astrology in Christianity, in the traditional form of Christianity that we know. You can't have astrology in there because astrology actually puts the power back into the hands of the person,
yeah.
whereas the way that Christianity, the religion, is structured, it literally goes from God to, like, whoever is that, so technically, historically. So let me break it down. This is like a little caveat right here.
Well, you're about to go somewhere that's very tricky.
So let me
And
just break this down real
it's very
quick.
tricky.
So
Go
it,
ahead.
it literally goes, and this is actually how it is geopolitically in the world right now today, and it's been this way for a couple thousand years. It literally goes from God to the Pope, and from the Pope to, like, the Catholic Pope, to the archbishops, and then it goes out to all those churches, right? All those dioceses, all of the Catholic churches. Now, when what's his name, Ignatius, did the Protestant Reformation and broke off from the Catholic Church, that structure was still in place. It went from God to whoever. If you set up, you still had bishops and, the people that headed all of these denominations. So now it went from God to those people, whoever those people were that were the head of those denominations, and then it went to the churches. So it's like an order of, control, and it
Yes.
exists to
Yes.
this day. It
Yes.
exists to this day.
And
So
and
astrology, if you bring in astrology, that kind of messes with that a little bit. Like, well, I'm understanding more about myself and understanding like who I am and how I'm put together and pieced together, and it's not really jiving with what you're talking about. So there's a conflict, there's a
Oh, it's
potential
major.
ideological conflict when you bring in. So that's why I think astrology gets a bad rap. That's why I think.
I 3 million, and I don't know if people even understand that's what's happening. I
Right.
totally agree with what you're saying. I just literally had a client. I was just doing an astrology guidance coaching session with a client who, to the very point of what you just said, who has only accessed her understanding of God through the lens of this external factor. So, whether that be receiving it in church, through a minister, through whatever that's external, and just really was very fixated on the externalization of God. And so I had to take a pause and say, I need you just for a moment. Do you know that song by Mary Mary called It's the God in Me? Do you know that song? I just want to just go there. And she's like, yeah, I know that song. I'm like, right. Do you like that song? And she's like, yeah, I mean, I said, have you ever paid attention to what they're saying in that song? And she's like, I don't know if I have. And I'm like, really? That in itself is curious
Hmm.
because this is a pretty significant message that they're saying, right? It's the God in me. And I love that Mary because they're so popular and they're in a more pop gospel kind of like culture. I don't mean pop music, but they're in mainstream, and so their messaging can go across in many ways. And I loved that they did that song because they, to me, were at that point of what you're saying is, can we begin to see God, can we see God inside of us? Can we understand that God isn't limited? It's
Hmm.
just is not limited. And so, yes, I totally agree that a lot of times, because the conditionality of or how people have been conditioned to understand God has been so limited, so micro,
Hmm.
intentionally,
Hmm.
right? But at the same time, not considering that it was intentional, but just thinking that's just what it is. And it's like, no. And one of the things I've been telling people who reach out to me and kind of have this bit of a conflict with everything you just said, because that's just how they've understood to practice their religion or to practice understanding God, was I said, is there any relationship that you have in your life that's the exact same way it was when you were 6 or when you were 10 or when you were 20? Those of us who are 50, or when you were 30, or when you were 40. There's no relationship that sits here that's going to be fruitful, right? And those relationships that do that, it's like annoying, right? Because we're like, no, I'm growing, I'm leveling up, I'm next level. It's like, so why would this energy want to keep us here in the relationship? And so I have tried to encourage people. God is spirit, God, however you're wanting to term this, is wanting to continue this relationship with you, wants to continue to see your growth and your development. And I have found that astrology is a tool, not the only, but is a very good tool to show you how these cycles of life and this growth pattern happens so that you can accept loss, grieve loss, and move and make room for growth and rebirth. Accept more loss, move forward, evolve, and accept more rebirth. It is the one tool that literally spells it out. Like, these are the things you need to consider letting die, letting go. And these are the things that are trying to manifest in your life so that you can be of service to yourself and to others.
Hmm.
There's not many tools that do that. Well, we're starting to learn more and more of the more mystic or occult spaces, that because that's the basis of a lot of that. But yeah, no, 3 million%, I agree. That's a big reason. And it's a heavy reason, and it's probably the biggest the most challenging part, because you've got to wrap your mind around understanding God differently. Or
Understanding God differently.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
I want to sit right there for a minute. Understanding God differently, because astrology. So the reason why I tell my story that I was Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. you know, but you and I both. went to Howard, so we lived in DC, and you remember how the the Hebrew Israelite brothers used to be like all over, DC, right? I don't know if you remember that, but
I mean, I wasn't
I,
in that culture because I consider that a culture, to be honest.
right.
And I wasn't in it, but I was aware of it.
Yeah, I'm saying if someone who moved around DC, you would see these guys and they'd be all together and like what are they doing? And they would have their book. You know, I was so Jesus, Jesus, Jesus that I used to run up to these dudes and battle with them. Like with my Bible, and I'd be like, "Yo, let's go," So the reason why I'd be like, "Yo, let's do it. What you got? What you know?" So the reason why I go into that is because I want people that are Christians or that are Muslim, and I tell a bit about my Muslim background in a previous video as well. I talk about that because I don't want people to think that I'm coming from the perspective of bashing Christianity, or I'm trying to recruit people to do astrology in this particular episode, um because I'm not. Like, I totally
Um,
understand where you are and what's going on
can,
with all of that. I totally understand that.
can I say something to this?
Mhm,
Because this really concerns me is how people think that astrology somehow needs to replace,
mhm,
or that it's an or that it replaces your faith practice. Um, that is so misguided and so just wrong. Such a misunderstanding. Astrology has never been seen as a religion, and I think that people who consider it as such are not understanding really what astrology is attempting to do. I think you're going to have the most expansiveness when you are able to have a certain sense of faith and whatever that practice is, and add into your toolbox. What is it now? I'm not saying that astrology needs to be in your toolbox. I think it's one of the tools. It's a tool that I have in my toolbox, but I have other tools that
mhm,
allow me to feel a sense of connection and to build my relationship with God. And for me, as I have added into my toolbox, it's also allowed me to see how much God is using other means to help me in terms of ancestors, in terms of spiritual guides, in terms of, just understanding my intuition. And it's really helped me. I think we're constantly attempting to grow. As long as you're here as a human, you're here to serve for growth. Like, that's the point. So I don't want people. I just always want to scream this. Please hold the faith that you understand to be true. If you feel astrology is challenging the way you've understood your faith to be, that doesn't mean just drop it. It just means, how about getting more curious about that and understanding what's causing the rub, and being open and seeing it more as um school or lesson, or how might God be trying attempting to strengthen your understanding and your faith, and really holding true to that. There's so many ways to approach it, as opposed to just dump on one and only do another. But to think of your faith journey as one that is a toolbox. You're building a house. You're not just building a couch. You're building a whole house. Your life is a whole house with many rooms, and has foundations, and it has carpet, and it has wood, and it has these multi layers. And to think that we're only going to build that house with a hammer, I think is foolish. It's foolish.
mhm,
We're building our homes with lots of tools, and understand astrology more than as a tool that is not replacing your whole religion.
mhm.
um and I've talked to more people who are very Bible Christian, very much, and use astrology
Mhm.
and understand astrology
Right.
and value it. So
Absolutely. I mean, and that's my perspective. It's like I want people, no matter where you are in your spiritual journey, to understand that there are lots of tools. I'm glad you mentioned that astrology is just one tool. There's a plethora of
Plethora.
tools that are out here to help you grow spiritually and grow in your understanding of really who you are as a soul and a divine being, because that's really, in my opinion, the purpose of religion, or it should be the purpose of religion, to grow you spiritually so that you are growing into a you're growing into a different type of being. um so we don't have time to go deep into that, but I want to, because we still got a couple more things to do. I want to ask you a question or a statement, and I want your opinion on it, and then we're going to go to some other things about astrology, and then we'll be done. um so I want to read this statement to you, and then I just want to get your take on it. All right.
Mhm, mhm.
This is kind of like a statement from a website called christianityfacts.com, and this is just a statement that comes from this website. Astrology is idolatrous because people assign celestial attributes God possess that only God possesses. Instead of viewing themselves as God's unique creation, who are made in his image, they believe the signs that people were born under determine their identity. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I would just say again, it's just a big misunderstanding. Astrology, first of all, just those of you who don't necessarily follow astrology, there is not one sign. There are 12 signs, and Barry and I got into, I don't know, we don't know if we're going to talk about the number 12 in a minute. But anyway, so we technically have every sign in us. So it's not singular. Just because you were born a certain sun sign, that doesn't. And there is no practice. There's nothing that you learn in astrology that's teaching you to idolatrize any. How you say that word? Idolize anything. It's
Right.
not. It's again, all it's doing, and I use this a lot, and I've said this to Barry a ton, is astrology is more or less like a map. I call it the weather report. It's like a radar, meaning when we're told it's raining outside, that doesn't tell us about our day. Now, we can assign some emotion behind that. We can just, those of us who love rains, like, yay, it's going to be rain. I can't wait. I'm going to sleep all day and relax and watch Netflix. Other of us are going to be like, oh no, I'm going to have traffic. I'm never going to get there, you know. And then others are like, oh, I love the rain. I'm going to go outside and play today. That rain just said it was going to rain. And so what astrology is doing is just saying this is if you understand that there is a sun, there is a moon, there's the planets of Jupiter, Saturn, all these planets. And astronomy, we're taught that in elementary school. We're taught about why you can't live on these planets as humans because of the way the matter exists and the heat and the hot and the bigness of Jupiter and the ring around the Saturn and all of these things that we learn. Astrology is just saying, okay, so given these planets exist, what impact are they having on Earth? What impact? That's all it's asking. And then it's saying, you as a human, because you carry value as both a soul and a human. And I think most people who believe in God believe that they have something, there's something soulful or spiritual about them. It's just saying, what does the impact of these energies potentially have? Not now go and worship us. No, it's just the sun is heat. The sun radiates light. It gives us light. The reason we have that December, that winter solstice, is because it's the shortest day of the year, to the point of what you said. The sun, the movement slows down so much that it pauses, that the darkness stays longer because the sun is hidden longer. So it's nature, which we understand astronomy as science. All astrology is doing, saying, okay, can we talk more about the impact it's having on humans?
Right.
Because it's having an impact on plants, it's having an impact on the ecosystem. We're not living in igloos. We're not living in little glass houses where
Right.
now that tree we can understand, study how the tree is getting impacted when the sun hits it. We understand what happens to the oceans and to the tides when water, whatever moon phase we're in. I mean, we have serious lunar phase understandings and
Mhm.
science of that, so that we can understand the impact of how that's going to impact our water, because water is such a big part of the earth. And the Farmer's Almanac, that's all astrology. That's all it is. It's just trying to kind of break down
Right.
what causes a season to be a season, and how will we know? We need that radar so we know how our crops will be.
Right.
So we know what we need to plant, what may not fare out so well this year, because this is because of the way that the Farmer's Almanac is telling us the way the weather is going to adjust. It's the same thing about that's what astrology is doing for us. This year
Right.
might be a little bit more challenging because we've got these planets doing this. So energetically, these planets naturally do this to us. So when they start moving around in certain positions energetically, just like that farmer understands his crops are not going to be maybe so great, or they're really going to be great here, there's another understanding of how it's going to impact us as humans. It's
Right.
just how nature impacts humans.
Yeah, and that's
So I
the
disagree with that
right.
statement.
So this is why we had to have this conversation, and it's already
We're
about
already
10
almost an
minutes.
hour. I
It's
know.
almost an hour, and we haven't even got to
We have
everything we
touched
want to talk
nothing.
about.
No.
So that's why I knew I was like, we're gonna probably have to do a part two.
But we're
So
going to have a lot more about astrology and spiritual shifts. So just stay tuned, but keep
yeah,
going. Yes.
yeah. All right. So what I want to do, we only have, like I said, we're about 51 minutes in. What I want you to do is I want you to just talk about a couple concepts in astrology, and then we can let people know how they can connect with you if they want to, find out more about astrology. So explain, kind of like, and we were going to talk about the numbers and how they relate
That's
to
part 3.
astrology, right? We can't even do that, but but can you explain kind of like what the houses are, what the signs are, how that all relates, and then maybe transits.
Yeah,
And I think
absolutely.
that's I don't I think that's all we have time for
I absolutely.
to,
Yeah, and I'll
to
try
go
to
through that.
be as simple as possible. So the signs, yeah, I'll start with that because that's the most familiar, right? Are
Right.
you a Leo? Are you a Gemini? So all the signs are just archetypes or characteristics that astrology assigns to different energies. Okay. I don't want to go heavy in depth, but when you look at a birth chart and when you look at kind of, because the birth chart is kind of the foundation of it all, it basically just shows that inside of us, we have 12 distinct energies that kind of exist on how we navigate our lives. That's really all it is. And so the signs are based on elements. So if you believe in fire, you believe in water, you believe in air, you believe in earth, every sign represents an elemental factor. Okay. And that's one of the things that I think is very helpful is if we believe in these elements, it's going to really, or if you understand how these elements work, it really helps you understand how astrology, the signs are based on the elements. Okay. And so that's important. So just real quick, like all your water signs are Scorpio, can there's 3 to each of the 4 elements. That's how you get the 12. So there's 3 fire, there's 3 water, 3 air, 3 earth. And just like we know fire is hot, fire is active, well, then those signs that are fire signs are going to have that type of energy. As we know that water is kind of mellow and water can go deep, and water deals with our emotions. And so earth is stabilizing. So those signs that are that's the energy. But we have every sign. So then the houses are just like we have 12 signs, there are 12 houses because every sign is assigned a house. And so all a house is, I tell people don't, that's just a terminology that astrology uses, but a house is just the parts of our life. And so astrology is looking at 12 distinct parts of our life, all the way from the I am to God, to spirituality, okay, to those parts of us that's unseen, or a lot of times astrology, they don't say God, they will say this, the unseen and the subconscious. and the spiritual kind of space. But it goes from money, like your financial and your assets, and assets literally as well as assets figuratively, like how yourself, all the way to marriage, partnership, legal, exchanging of resources, career, work, health, all of that is a part of that. And then what was the other one you said? You asked me about
The transits.
the transits. Yes, super
Mhm.
important. So your birth chart is basically a screenshot of what the planets in the sky were doing, looked like at the very moment you were born, the very second, the very place that you were born. That's the birth chart. That never changes. But obviously, the planets are always moving, right? They're tick, 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 and every planet moves at a different rate. Okay, and it's moving and when we say moving, meaning how is it moving in relationship to the Earth? Okay, so a transit is just basically talking about how the planets are moving in each sign. Because the idea is that as the planets move, they shift into different signs and different energies, different elements. So right now, Pluto, the big one in the astrology world, is Pluto just made its major transit into Aquarius. Pluto is so far away. Some old school astrologers don't consider Pluto as a part of astrology because they just found Pluto in a not just found, but it was a more recent planet. Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, they're considered the outer planets. But I'm using Pluto because since Pluto is the furthest away, it takes the longest to get around the Earth. And so the reason why this transit, it's movement, that's all transit means, movement, just the planet moving into a different sign. Pluto, this is so important because Pluto's so far away. It takes Pluto several years just to go sign to sign. So it was sitting in Capricorn, the sign of Capricorn, for 14 years. It stood there. Just to add perspective, we have a birthday every year. So that means the sun is going around, all the signs within 30 days. Like it's just, it moves pretty quickly. But that's because it's close. But Pluto's far, so it takes a long time, which means Pluto's energy sits energetically somewhere for a long time. Now Pluto just got into Aquarius. It's going to do a bit of a retrograde, which all it means is that it just slows down. It doesn't technically go backwards, but it slows down a bit. And when it goes into retrograde, it'll leave Aquarius, it'll go back to Capricorn for a moment later this year, but then it's going to go back and it's going to stay going forward. And the reason this is important, this is so important, is because Pluto hasn't been in Aquarius in over 200 years. Over 200 years was the last time. So we get to live and watch the slowest moving planet or the furthest planet go into a sign that it hasn't been in for so long. And Aquarius is a very powerful energetic sign. It's an air sign. And when you were talking about understanding, self, this is why a lot of light bulbs are happening, because Aquarius is an energy about the knowing and the knowing of self so that it can add to the collective. So it's a serious thing. Transits are very important. But I think that your birth chart is the most important. And, that can segue us as we wrap up to, like, if you want to learn more about that, because just because Pluto's moving into Aquarius, depending on where Aquarius sits in your chart for you, it's going to impact your life differently, depending on the house you have Aquarius in. So if someone has Aquarius in their second house, they're going to experience something probably different than those who have Aquarius in their eighth house. So that's why it all starts to, add up on each other. But transits
Right.
are important because they help you better understand energetically what's happening in the different parts of your life.
Right. Oh,
Ah,
this is so this is just so like, man,
it's so
this is
fascinating.
it's not enough time. It's
It's
not enough
not.
time.
We
It's not enough
but
time.
but
We're
this
gonna do
is why
this.
we're gonna make this a part of
Yeah, we're
spiritual
gonna
shift.
make this part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um
Not what
this
you do every week, but in other as we grow. And
right, yeah, we're gonna definitely do a part two to this because it may even be a regular
segment.
a
It's a
regular
segment.
segment,
Yeah, it's a
the
segment.
Bible and astrology, because it's so important, it's so valuable, and if you're about it, you're about it. If you're not, it's okay. You don't have to be about it.
Well, Barry,
Um,
I think what's really important what you're doing is you are at least talking about this and how to hold the two spaces together. A
mhm.
lot of times people are talking about this and negating one or the other.
Right,
And
right.
that's not what you're saying. You're saying, how do we begin to
Mhm.
hold the space together? And I
Yeah,
think that is revolutionary. That is so important. That's so Aquarian,
yeah,
to be finally like, let's have the conversation of the and, not the
right,
or, because
right.
there is an and. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to be the best Christian or the best Muslim or the best Jewish person, or you want to just grow spiritually, you want to, like, you have to understand some things about yourself. You have to know who you are, what things that that you were born with. What are your tendencies? What's your relationship with your family and your siblings and your
Yeah.
romantic relationships, like your work life, your love, like all of that stuff. You like astrology helps you peek. It helps you peek into that and be like, oh my God, look at that.
Right.
So, but all
Right.
right, so we're gonna wrap up. Tell people how, if they want to learn more about astrology, how they can tap in to your amazing knowledge and resource.
Absolutely. So I have here where it says at Kenya MJ Music, and that's my social media handle pretty much across the board except for TikTok. I have a different thing on TikTok that is specifically to astrology. But if you just simply go to findingyourvoiceafter40.com, that's my main website because my business, I'm a certified holistic wellness coach, and in addition to being an astrology guidance coach. And my background is counseling, guys. So that's what my master's degree is. And that's why I take this from a healing perspective. And I don't use astrology just so you can have some fun facts, but you actually use it in your journey, personal, spiritual, however it is, because it's can be used across the way. So if you just go to findingyourvoiceafter40.com, and on the tabs, you'll see a variety of things, but that's probably the easiest way. You can also follow me on Instagram at Kenya MJ Music. And when you go on Instagram on my profile where it says like the link of the main link, you click on that and you'll see the services as well. And I encourage you, I do free discovery calls because I don't, because of the counselor in me, there's no counselor that you go see and you book and pay $200 and now you're gonna be my therapist. That's not how that works. That's you need to vet people, you need to get to know, and I want people to get to know me. I may not be for you, you may not be a good fit for what I do, whatever. So I do free discovery calls. They're just like 15, 20 minutes or whatever. Sometimes I go as long as 30 minutes just to better so that you have a really clear understanding of what are sessions, because it's not going to be just a reading. If you already are like, no, I'm vibing, I'm feeling, then those links have a direct link where you can just book a reading. And again, my readings are coaching sessions. So you're not going to just come in and be told where all your planet placements and houses are. We're going to go through and actually help guide you. And I highlight for you the areas of the life that probably that the soul is really wanting you to to do some letting go and some rebirth and growth. So it's a fun time. It's a really fun time. That's the best way to get in touch.
Awesome, awesome. And to follow Spiritual Shift, at the time that this is being recorded, we're still working on getting all of those socials up and all those links up. So it will, by the time this is posted, it will be in the description.
Yeah, I was gonna say
And
it's gonna be in that description by
so
then.
just check
Yeah.
the description. I'm not going to give you anything verbally right now, but just check the description and the links will be there, how you can follow Spiritual Shift. And with
Yeah.
that, I think
Can I say
we
one more thing just real
absolutely,
quick? Real
yep,
quick.
absolutely,
So Barry and I don't know if you said this, but we're partners.
absolutely.
And so spiritual shift is a space that, we're building together, and I'm taking more of the astrological arm and he's taking more of the spiritual teaching. So I'm excited. I'm so excited, Barry, that you're doing this and that you are taking a lead on these videos. But we really, like you said, by the time this airs, there will be a space where you can begin to be a part of the community and gain more. So I just wanted to make sure the peoples know because they're like, who
People
this chick?
know.
Who this chick?
Thank you,
Yeah.
babe.
You're
You
welcome.
know,
You're welcome.
I'll be needing you. All right. So after I think she said it all, thank you for hanging out with us, and check the description to follow us, and we'll see you next time. Peace. Remember, love is the way. All right. Bye.